Here is everything that might be going down in Season 5, starting right at the top with the one thing that has been confusing absolutely everyone, which is the Henry Creel's school timeline situation. If you go back and watch Season 4, Henry is very clearly a little kid, a preteen, probably around 12 years old in 1959, and that is just a visual fact. Logically, that means there is absolutely no way that he could be attending high school. He should be in middle school, or maybe even still in elementary school, depending on the cutoff dates. But then we get Max physically entering Vecna's memory, and suddenly we are walking the halls of Hawkins High. And even weirder, Joyce Byers is right there. On the surface, this looks like the writers just decided to throw the timeline out the window or retcon his age, which would be super annoying. But if you actually dig into the tiny details, it stops being a plot hole and starts explaining the entire messed up psychology of our main villain. The most common theory, and honestly the only one that saves the show's logic, is that the hallway scene Max sees is not a literal historical record like a security camera tape, but a construct, a psychic remix of reality that Vecna has built to tell a specific story. We know from the first Shadow stage play that the school was putting on a play. The flyer Joyce is handing out says Oklahoma, but that was actually a cover for the real production they were doing, which was a play called Dark of the Moon. This is crucial because Dark of the Moon is a story about a witch boy who desperately wants to become human to be with a girl, but he gets rejected and hunted by a superstitious... Does that sound familiar? Henry Creel almost certainly played that witch boy character. Even if he was 12, if Hawkins had a combined junior and senior high school, which was super common in rural Indiana back then to save money, he could have easily been the weird, quiet theater kid cast in a supporting role alongside the older, cooler students like Joyce. This perfectly explains how he knows her, how he knows the layout of the school, and how he was in that environment without actually being a sophomore in high school. This connects directly to why he is specifically targeting certain families. In that memory Max is walking through, she sees a guy with his arm around a girl, looking like the king of the school, and the guy is a Harrington. That has to be Steve's dad. If Henry was this outcast kid sitting in the shadows watching the cool high schoolers like Mr. Harrington being arrogant and the artistic ones like Joyce being popular, he was building a hit list of people he resented. He was targeting the legacies of the people who he felt ostracized him. The theory suggests that literally everyone on that Oklahoma play poster has been targeted in some way, either directly or through their children. Joyce was targeted through Will being taken. The Harringtons were targeted through Steve getting beat up every season and almost dying to demobats, and others through the various monsters destroying the town. It completely recontextualizes Vecna. He is a petty, grudging human being who is still fighting a high school popularity contest from 1959 that nobody else realizes they are even participating in. The scene Max walks through is a manipulated memory, stylized and filtered to make Henry look like the tragic victim, the misunderstood witch boy surrounded by bullies, which is exactly the narrative he wants Max to believe, so she stops fighting. It's propaganda. Once you wrap your head around Henry's origin story and realize he's basically a theater kid gone rogue, you have to look at what he actually became, which leads us to the curse of the hand and eye theory. This is probably the most hardcore explanation for what is happening to Will Byers, and it fits the D&D theme so perfectly it hurts. In Dungeons & Dragons lore, the Hand of Vecna and the Eye of Vecna are these two ancient, incredibly evil artifacts. To use them, you have to literally cut off your own hand or gouge out your own eye and replace them with artifacts to gain godlike power. The theory here is that the Mind Flayer, or whatever ancient eldritch cloud entity lives in Dimension X, is the source of this curse, and it needed two human vessels to fully manifest its will in our world. Henry Creel is the hand. He is the one who strikes out, the one who builds the gates, the one who does the physical dirty work of snapping limbs and crushing eyes. We know he disappeared into Dimension X for 12 hours when he was a kid. He went in a normal human boy and came out with his blood changed and his mind warped. The entity infected him, turning him into the hand. But a hand is useless without sight, right? You can't hit what you can't see. That is where Will comes in. Will Byers is the eye. This theory suggests that Will wasn't taken randomly in Season 1 just because he was biking home late. He was chosen. The entity needed a second vessel, someone sensitive, quiet, and traumatized, to act as the sensory organ for the invasion. This explains why Will was kept alive in the library with a gross tube shoved down his throat while poor Barb was killed immediately. They were incubating him. They were trying to turn him into the eye. This is why Will has true sight now. It's why he can see into the Upside Down without actually being there. It's why he gets goosebumps and can sense Vecna's presence before anyone else. He is technically a part of the hive mind already. The lore says the hand and eye must be united to create the ultimate destruction, but they also must be united to be destroyed. This means the only way to kill Vecna might be to destroy the connection between Henry and Will. It puts Will in a terrifying position where he might have to sacrifice himself, or at least sacrifice his connection to the realm to sever the tether. This gives a whole new meaning to the song Should I Stay or Should I Go? It's a prophecy about Will's final choice. Does he stay in the physical world and fight, or does he go into the void to drag the entity down with him? The theory suggests Will is the pendulum swinging between these two states, and his final decision will determine the fate of the entire world. And hey, speaking of fate, if you are enjoying this deep dive into the madness and want to make sure you survive the apocalypse, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. It's the only way to keep the Demogorgons away from your house. I don't make the rules, I just follow them. Now, speaking of that world, we have to talk about the nature of the Upside Down itself, because the memory loop theory is really the only thing that explains why that place is frozen in time. The Upside Down isn't a parallel universe in the traditional sci-fi sense like the multiverse. It is a psychic recording. It is frozen specifically on November 6, 1983, the exact day Will was taken. The theory is that when the connection between the hand, Henry, and the eye, Will, was first established, the psychic shock was so massive, so nuclear, that it essentially took a screenshot of Hawkins and pasted it over the chaotic wasteland of Dimension X. It created a bubble. This is why nothing changes there. Henry, who we know hates the passage of time because he sees human life as a meaningless cycle of waking up, working, and dying, wants to impose this stillness on the real world. This bleeds right into the time is the villain theory, which suggests that Vecna's ultimate goal is to merge the frozen time of the Upside Down with the flowing time of the real world. He wants to stop the clock permanently. He wants to create a world where nothing dies, but nothing grows either. It's eternal stasis, a perfectly preserved museum of his victory. The grandfather clock is the literal blueprint for his spell. The 12 victims correspond to the 12 numbers on the clock face. Once he claims all 12, the circle is complete, the barrier shatters, and the two timelines collapse into one. This is the doom Nancy saw in her vision. It was reality itself breaking down. The four gates meeting in the center of Hawkins form the massive X that marks the spot for this convergence. This aligns perfectly with the idea that Henry sees himself as a savior who is freeing people from the constraints of time and mortality by absorbing them into his hive mind, where they exist forever in his twisted memories. He thinks he's doing us a favor. If Henry has created this fortress of memory, then we need to talk about where he is keeping his prisoners, which brings us to the Camazotz theory. In the book, A Wrinkle in Time, which the show references constantly, Camazotz is a planet of total conformity, ruled by a disembodied brain called Iti. The theory is that Vecna's mind layer, that red soup world where he keeps Max's consciousness, is Camazotz. It's a prison of the mind. Max isn't dead, but she isn't really alive either. She is trapped in Henry's psychic hard drive. The boombox theory suggests that the way to get her out involves a specific, high-stakes rescue mission using music as a frequency disruptor. We've seen leaked shots and teasers of Lucas holding a boombox while looking absolutely terrified, like he's staring death in the face. You don't carry a boombox during an apocalypse unless it is a weapon. The theory is that Max and potentially Holly Wheeler are trapped in this Mindscape, and they have to make a run for it, and the music is their GPS signal home. Now let's zoom out to the entity itself, because there is a very strong theory floating around that the Mind Flayer is the true big bad, and Henry is just a puppet. This is the Henry is a prisoner theory. Remember when Brenner told Henry, "You are the prisoner"? He might have been more right than he knew. Henry thinks he is the predator, that he tamed the shadow in the wilderness, but the theory suggests the shadow tamed him. When Henry found those swirling particles in Dimension X, he didn't shape them, they entered him. They amplified his darkest traits, his nihilism, his hatred, and used him as a tool to open the door to Earth. The Mind Flayer is an eldritch horror that consumes worlds. It doesn't care about Henry's high school trauma or his daddy issues. It just used those emotional hooks to get him to do its bidding. This would explain why Henry looks so miserable and why he was crying in the lab memories. He is trapped in a suit of his own making, a slave to a hive mind he thinks he controls. This leads to the terrifying idea that the wall we saw in the Upside Down is actually keeping the true horror in. The Upside Down is basically a small terrarium Henry built within the vastness of Dimension X. Beyond that wall is the domain of the Mind Flayer. If that wall falls, it's not just Vecna the party has to worry about. It's a cosmic entity that creates wormholes and eats stars. This aligns with the Brenner New sub-theory. Brenner might have suspected that Henry was in contact with something else, something alien, which is why he was so obsessed with studying him and then controlling 11. He was trying to build a weapon to fight the thing he saw inside Henry. It makes Brenner a little less of a cartoon villain and more of a desperate, unethical scientist trying to stop a nuclear bomb he helped build. Finally, we have to look at how this all ends, and the time reset theory is the most likely contender given the show's influences and the corner they've painted themselves into. If the Upside Down is a frozen memory loop, destroying the anchor, Vecna and the Mind Flayer, should theoretically cause the loop to collapse. When a time loop collapses, reality often snaps back to the point of divergence. The theory is that the show will end exactly where it began, November 6, 1983. The boys are playing D&D in the basement. Will leaves to bike home, but this time, because the entity has been destroyed in the future or the past relative to the loop, the Demogorgon never appears. Will makes it home safe. The entire series is erased from the timeline, but the memories or the emotional bonds remain deep in their subconscious. The kids might have a sense of déjà vu, a feeling that they are best friends who have been through a war, but they get to live normal lives without trauma. This ties into the love breaks the hive mechanic that has been set up since day one. Throughout the show, the only thing that disrupts the hive mind is genuine human emotion. Joyce reaching Will, Mike reaching 11, Max running to her friends. The hive mind is logic and cold order. Love is chaos and warmth. The final battle will be a mass injection of humanity into the hive mind. If Will, the Eye, can inject his love for his friends and his family into the network, he can act as a virus. He can rot the Mind Flayer from the inside out. He disrupts the perfect rhythm of Camazotz. This validates the D&D metaphor where the campaign always ends with the party doing something unpredictable that the dungeon master didn't plan for. Vecna is the DM trying to kill the party, and the party is going to flip the table and rewrite the ending.